Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham.
What have you done?
As if December didn't already have enough gifts, we've now got another full trailer for Batman vs Superman, and while some people think this is the gift that gave away a little too much, it's still a gift nonetheless, and I'm still excited about it. It's full of hints and teases and Easter eggs and other words that mean the same thing. But if you do think I end up missing something, we might have already covered it in our last breakdown of the first Batman vs Superman trailer. Feel free to check that one out too. But let's dive right into this one.
Who's that?
You must be new. That is Bruce Wayne.
We start out with a different perspective on a party we've already seen glimpses of before, and it sets the tone for this trailer right off the bat. No pun intended. I just mean that this trailer, unlike the last one, actually isn't as focused on the action and fighting between our two main characters, but rather their ideological differences. But I'll come back to that in a second. So this car that Bruce is driving is an Aston Martin DB Mark III, and it's a fun reference because that's what James Bond drives in the novel version of Goldfinger, and in the Ian Fleming novels, that's the only car that Bond ever loads up with gadgets. And as we know from Bruce's other car, he really likes cars with gadgets. Did you notice the moment when Clark gets his first glimpse of his main antagonist for the movie? That peaceful violin music is interrupted by a discordant piano chord. Not the most subtle thing, but still pretty cool. Let's move on.
Mr. Wayne. Clark Kent, Daily Planet.
What's your position on the Bat Vigilante in Gotham?
We then enter the party, which seems like it could be some sort of charity auction with this bike on display. In fact, maybe that's the same one that Lex is riding in the other trailer. Also, this artwork could be for sale too, but taking an extra look at that artwork, if you're in Los Angeles, there's a small chance that it actually might look familiar to you. That's because it's painted by an LA-based artist, Cleon Peterson, who paints these really epic but dark scenes of violence and torture, and this one looks like it could be an extension of his piece called A Balance of Terror. And like most art, there are a couple of different ways to look at it, and I think that's why it's being featured in this particular scene. But I actually want to keep moving through the trailer, so how about I just revisit that as we go? Cool? All right, let's go.
Civil liberties are being trampled on in your city. People living in fear. He thinks he's above the law.
After Clark asks Bruce about the Bat Vigilante in Gotham, he points out that that guy's trampling on civil liberties, everyday people of the city are having to live in fear, and that this vigilante thinks he's above the law. So about that painting again, it depicts simple, everyday people attacked by dark, shadowy figures who actually wear black underwear, and even as they maim and torture these people, the casual demeanor of the dark figures implies there's no one around policing them. They're an unchecked force. Sounds a lot like Clark's perspective on the Bat Vigilante, right? The trailer matches Clark's words with this chained up criminal who's been branded with a bat symbol. Now, I'll admit that actually sounds a bit meaner than Batman usually is portrayed, so either Batman's being set up to look worse than he is, or Clark might be right and we might be seeing a version of Batman who, after being out there for so long, has actually gotten pretty ruthless. Also fun to note that the brand made sure to leave that diamond-shaped space for the Superman logo. Thanks for the consistency. Now, as for the newspaper itself, we'll come back to it.
Daily Planet criticizing those who think they're above the law is hypocritical. What'd you say? Considering every time your hero saves a cat out of a tree, you read a puff piece editorial about an alien. You could burn the whole place down.
So as we still see this shot of the Gotham Free Press newspaper, it becomes an example of how the Gotham Press covers the Batman stories, showing images of him putting criminals away by any means necessary, to contrast with Bruce's criticism of Metropolis's newspaper and Clark Kent himself.
The Daily Planet criticizing those who think they're above the law is hypocritical.
By pointing out that all the Daily Planet writes about their hero is puff pieces where he saves cats out of trees, or Russian cosmonauts from explosions, or people from floods. But that's not just meant to contrast the newspapers or even Gotham and Metropolis, but actually the differences in what the job of a hero is according to these two men. Superman sees the role of a hero as one who comes to the aid of the helpless, saves people from disaster, while Batman actually sees the hero's job as putting an end to the threats in the first place, seeking out the criminals, the darkness, and eliminating threats before they can strike at all. It's no wonder that he describes Superman as an alien that could burn the whole place down. He he's technically right about that being possible, and that's what he thinks his job is, to identify those people who are threats and take them out. And like I said before, you can look at art a lot of different ways, so revisiting that same painting from before, you might see something else, because when the painter himself was asked about what was being depicted in his art, he talks about power. He mentions the idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely, meaning anyone with pure unstoppable power will be completely corrupted by it. His art shows the absolute power individuals can't help but see the normal, everyday, unpowered people as weaklings that are there for them to torment and rule over. Not only does that sound like what Bruce's fears of Superman are, but it actually sounds a lot like what Lex says in a moment about power too.
You know the oldest lie in America, Senator? That power can be innocent.
It's not surprising that Bruce and Lex might actually be on the same side for a large part of the movie. And talking about Superman's unbridled power, that's an epic Superman statue, and it kind of reminds me of Atlas, who was not exactly a god, but a titan, who were kind of like the parents of the Olympian gods. Atlas holds the weight of the earth on his shoulders, and since he just defended the earth from an alien attack, some would say Superman does the same. But it is safe to say that Bruce is not alone in hating on this supposed god, since the other trailer showed us that this statue eventually gets defaced because it represents worshipping of a false god. It's a pretty complicated situation, right? Oh, and hey, in that shot you can see Scooter McNairy in a wheelchair, though we still don't technically know what role he's playing, but this statue seems to be part of a larger memorial with all those candles around it, so maybe he's someone who was injured in the Zod attack from Man of Steel. The way he looks up at the statue makes me think he's a fan of Supes, but we still don't fully know.
Most of the world doesn't share your opinion, Mr. Wayne.
Maybe it's the Gotham City in me. We just have a bad history with freaks dressed like clowns.
Okay, this stuff is pretty straightforward, but incredibly awesome. Bruce confirms that Batman's got a dark history with the Joker, and the timing of that shot of the defaced Robin costume really makes it seem like the Joker did in fact kill Robin. There's actually a lot more to say about the Joker in this movie and Suicide Squad and everything, but luckily we did a whole other video on that and how the Joker might not be the real Joker. Maybe check that out after this video. But it's also kind of funny that in a very simple way, Bruce is just making fun of Superman's costume. Like, I guess it is a little more clownish than dressing up as a bat, but still, you are just as likely to see all three of those looks at a birthday party. Oh, and speaking of Joker-like clowns, let's keep going.
Boys, Bruce Wayne meets Clark Kent. I love it. I love bringing people together. How are we?
Lex?
Hi, hello. Lex, it is a pleasure. Ow, wow, that is a good grip. You should not pick a fight with this person.
So we get a big dose of Lex here, and he's definitely a bit of a clown, and some say the inclusion of this comedic feel in this trailer was an attempt for DC to show that they aren't as dark as everyone's making them out to be, and they can be just as quippy and funny as Marvel. And what's funny about that is that the new Civil War trailer is anything but quippy and fun. Now they're the ones that seem all dark, but whatever, who cares? There's no reason we can't have both. It's all great. And anyway, I actually think that Lex is playing up his silliness here. Just like Bruce Wayne in the Dark Knight trilogy, when the billionaire distracts people with his outward eccentricities, no one dives deeper to see what they're really up to and who they really are on the inside.
Guy dresses up like a bat clearly has issues.
It's kind of fun to note that at this moment here, there's three of DC's biggest characters all in one room, all hiding behind their version of a secret identity. When you combine that with the other trailer, you'll remember I think Wonder Woman is also here in her secret identity too, and that's just another reason why I think this scene is just gonna be awesome. Though it does make me wonder, even though they're all in some form of disguise, doesn't it feel like some of them might know the truth? Like the way Bruce talks about Superman, and he is the world's greatest detective, so that wouldn't be too surprising if he knew his identity, but also the way Lex talks about the two of them.
Bruce Wayne meets Clark Kent. I love bringing people together.
It suggests that, sure, this is his event, but also that he might be the one who orchestrated their entire feud in the first place. Like maybe after Congress didn't punish Superman enough, he's created a situation where he uses Batman's distrust to attempt to kill Superman. That kind of evil brilliance is totally typical for Lex because some consider him to be one of the smartest people on the planet, though there's a lot of debate about whether or not he's smarter than Batman. But this shot is still a nice reminder that as big a threat as those two are physically, Lex is just as serious a threat, making up for his physical size with the size of his vast intellect. Okay, let's pick up the pace a little bit.
You know the oldest lie in America, Senator? That power can be innocent.
You're gonna go to war. That son of a bitch which brought the war to us.
A lot of these shots we've seen before in the other trailers, so I'll only point out a few things. This long walk scene had an extended cut released right before this trailer, but the big speculation with anything in this orangey tint is that it might just be a dream sequence, since the toys refer to this costume as Knightmare Batman. Also, that Luthor quote I mentioned before about power not being innocent is timed with this footage, so it would make sense that this version of a corrupt, power-hungry Superman is Batman's worst nightmare. Of course, this is all just a guess. Also, in that Senate panel hearing, we get another glimpse at Scooter McNairy, and pairing this with him at the memorial makes me think he's gonna maybe testify on Superman's behalf, which would line up with the guess that he might be playing Jimmy Olsen, Superman's best pal. Just a version with no legs. This cool shot of the new Batcave reveals that it might be underground somewhere that's connected to water, be it sewers or something like the secret swimming pools of the Paris catacombs. And you can see what looks like the Batmobile and the Batcomputer and the Robin costume from before, though it looks like the graffiti isn't there yet, which is interesting because if it's from the Joker, does that mean he's running around Gotham at the same time as this movie's taking place? But also, maybe the graffiti is already there and we can't see it. It's a pretty blurry shot. The rest of this section is just Bruce's perspective on the Zod attack from Man of Steel, so let's move on.
You know you can't win this. It's suicide.
The greatest gladiator match in the history of the world. Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham.
Here's where the real action of the trailer starts, and we see a really good look at Batman's mechanized battle armor, and notice the way you can see his normal suit arm there? That means that this thing isn't like the Hulkbuster type armor that covers him entirely, but more like an exoskeleton that he wears, kind of like Ripley's power loader from Alien. That strap is probably for the gun that we'll see him with a little later. We'll get back to that. And these shots being fired at Superman, they seem to be coming from all directions, and I wouldn't be surprised if it means that clever old Bruce Wayne has designed a specific location to be a trap for Superman. And since the 90s comics, they've used Superman's charged up eyes to indicate that he's like beyond pissed, which is a really helpful way to know that someone should not be messed with. But let's keep going.
You're psychotic.
It's a three-syllable word for any thought too big for little minds.
It's time you learn what it means to be a man.
Stay down! If I wanted it, you'd be dead already.
Note that Lex has a hand injury here, and I have a couple of guesses about it, but I'm not confident enough to totally stop for them, so let me know why you think he has a hand injury. And then we see this really cool shot of Batman smashing through glass, but the way he uses his cape creates this silhouette of a bat symbol, and it's really reminiscent of the look of the bat signal. Nice. After some cool shots of the Batmobile, there's Batman slamming the hell out of Superman into a wall, and unless my eyes are deceiving me, I think we see Superman spit out blood. So this moment right here indicates that Batman might have brought kryptonite to the party, and if that's the case, it's anybody's game. The next shot has that orange hue, so again, it might be a dream sequence, which would make sense why there are all these creepy insect creatures flying about. However, if we are lucky, those are not just random insect creatures, but instead parademons who are loyal soldiers to Darkseid. Now, Darkseid is way too big a villain to just throw in there casually, but if these are parademons, then they might be foreshadowing Darkseid as the villain for the upcoming Justice League movie. That'll be epic. And finally, we get to this badass Superman quote here.
Stay down! If I wanted it, you'd be dead already.
Now, a lot of people were wondering if this movie would dance around the fact that at the end of the day, Superman could pretty easily just crush Batman, and with his super speed, Batman wouldn't even have noticed it happened. So this line not only admits that, yeah, if Superman wanted, he could easily kill Batman, but it also reveals that this is less a battle of abilities and more a battle of will. And in the graphic novel Hush, Batman defines this battle pretty clearly. If Clark wanted to, he could use his super speed and squish me into the cement, but I know how he thinks. Even more than the kryptonite, he's got one big weakness. Deep down, Clark's essentially a good person, and deep down, I'm not. That's such a badass moment, and you should totally read Hush, but it also explains why these two are able to fight at all. It's about just how far they're willing to go to win. Let's keep going.
Man will kill God. The devil will do it.
What have you done?
And that right there is the moment a lot of people think this trailer should have ended, but it still showed us a lot more. So some interesting stuff to point out here before I dive into all that other stuff. Seeing Lex in a lab coat might seem strange for these days, but the Lex as a rich, successful businessman, that's relatively recent. Like, that's only how he's been portrayed since maybe the 80s, but before that, he was always more of a mad scientist using his crazy inventions to try to take on Superman. Then we see that old shot of Zod's bod with Mercy Graves guiding it through LexCorp, and even though we now know that our previous guess was right and Luthor uses Zod to create Doomsday, which, by the way, thank you to all the commenters that have been congratulating us over on that other video of ours. You guys are very nice, thank you. But it is worth pointing out that they seem to be using a lot more of the origin story for Bizarro here. You see, back in the pre-Crisis days, Zod was cloned into a bunch of Bizarro soldiers, and in the post-Crisis days, Lex Luthor made a messed up clone of Superman that resulted in Bizarro. Also, the creation of Bizarro has many times been compared to that of Frankenstein's monster, and seeing the dead body here, the lightning and electricity, it all seems to result in a monster. That seems to still hold true here too. And I think that's because a lot of people have always doubted we would ever really see the true form of Bizarro in a movie, because based on the way he acts and talks, it'd be really hard to make him come off as anything other than a mentally handicapped version of Superman.
What is it?
Very ugly dress you are wearing. Me like it a lot. Why you scream? Me Bizarro. Me friend.
Bizarro's not the most politically correct of villains. So it seems like they're merging things here and giving us that backstory, but leading to the creation of Doomsday. Now, Doomsday himself has an origin that I think is pretty awesome, and I covered it in that other Doomsday video, so if you want to know more about that, check out that video. Some quick other things to note, that line of Luthor's,
Man won't kill God. The devil will do it.
so the devil's Doomsday, and the god he's referring to is Superman, but what about the man that won't kill God? This could refer to mankind, like Congress isn't punishing Superman or something, but also it could refer to the fact that Batman was supposed to kill Superman, reaffirming the possibility that it was Luthor who planned their fight all along. And that didn't work, so now he's making Doomsday. Also, why is Superman just standing there behind him so calmly? Combine that with the shot of Superman kneeling to Lex in the other trailer, and it makes you wonder what Lex has on him, or if Superman is like under some sort of mind control? I don't know. And the building near the Superman statue, it's being lit up by electricity, and I could be wrong, but that looks to me like it's water cascading down the side. Now wait, earlier in that newspaper, there was a mention of funding cuts to the water board made them put testing on hold. Could that be related to this weird experiment here? Also, if there's testing being done on water, that's one way to get an Aquaman pissed at you. But also, seeing that picture again, maybe that's not connected to this building, but instead it could be where the new Batcave is located? I don't know. Whatever it is, I think there's something there. Moving on.
What have you done?
Okay, and here we are, the last section of the trailer and her big Doomsday reveal. And some people think we're seeing Doomsday because they wanted to show a big difference between this movie and Civil War. Other people think it could be because most of the toys of the characters have already leaked and they didn't want us to get our first glimpse of Doomsday through toys. I don't know, but here he is. Though he doesn't look exactly like the Doomsday we know. In fact, he kind of looks like a combo of Abomination from Incredible Hulk and the Cave Troll from Fellowship of the Ring, the recent Ninja Turtles, and dare I say, a little like Michael Shannon himself. He has his father's eyes. But one reason he could look a little different is because one Doomsday power that makes him such a big threat is that he adapts to damage. So he's already got a bunch of these bony protrusions. Throughout the fight, he could end up growing a bunch more bone as he adapts, and then he'll look just as adorable as we're used to. Oh, and speaking of Doomsday's powers, he doesn't normally have heat vision or whatever the hell this whole face thing is, but that kind of makes sense if he's based on Zod. Also, I think this reaffirms the likelihood that the shot of Batman dodging a huge blast earlier is probably from Doomsday and not Superman like the editing implies. And speaking of tricky editing, there's something going on here because it's unlikely that Batman went from being seated and strapped in to standing with a gun in his hands in like 3 seconds. But he is Batman, so maybe. Oh, and speaking of that gun, a lot of people are like, no way, Batman isn't allowed to use guns. That's not entirely true. He has used guns before, before. He doesn't prefer them, but he was just fighting Superman, so an exception makes sense. And this gun in particular looks to be the one they showed off in that glass case a while back, making it actually a freaking sticky grenade launcher. And you gotta hand it to Batman. If he's gonna use a gun, it's gonna be a grenade launcher. I'm actually excited to see how it works. Oh, also his voice in this moment.
I thought yours with you.
It sounds very different from the...
Do you bleed?
So each voice is probably tied to what he's wearing, and that means he's using technology to alter his voice rather than gargling shards of glass like Christian Bale did.
Where are they?
That actually could be a cool idea that they borrowed from Arrow. Oliver Queen uses a similar trick to alter his voice.
Sergeant Warner, you have failed this city.
And finally, she's barely in this trailer, but she almost steals the entire show with her epic entrance, Wonder Woman. So very cool. Her badass shield can apparently withstand a full-on heat blast, and I'd love to see how it compares to Cap's vibranium shield, but that's never gonna happen. But aside from that, you can see there's ancient, like, Greek inscriptions on it. I have absolutely no idea what they mean, so let me know if you think you know. Okay, and one last thing I want to mention about that painting. The artist has also said, sure, he's depicting images of the powerful killing and torturing, but he said to remember that the victims of yesterday become the antagonizers of tomorrow. Kind of like how the victim of Superman's power has now returned to antagonize him today. I told you there's a lot going on with that painting. So let's discuss in the comments some of these themes and our guesses about the movie. If you've got questions for me, you can always hit me up at Fimo and get updates about our videos and our website at New Rockstars. If you happen to be in Los Angeles, you can actually check out some street art by that artist over on Santa Monica and Orange Grove. See? Pretty cool, right? Fun fact, my first apartment in LA was right over there, so if you want to stalk me, feel free. Alright, I've been Philip Molina. I'll see you next time. Bye.
We have lots to learn. Me go to college.